than thought. Now, that story's been scotched as only part of contingency planning, but it was a symptom of the dramatic turn of events in South Australia, and it flushed out other remarks from water academics and people like Tim Flannery, indicating that things were really much worse than had been foreshadowed even earlier this year. So is Adelaide, let alone some whole regions of South Australia, in serious bother, considering that the vast majority of its drinking water comes from the beleaguered Murray, something many of us outside the state may not have quite realised? Is their predicament something we have to face up to as a nation?
Neo-Latin. Those of you who've never heard the term Neo-Latin may be forgiven for thinking it's a new South American dance craze. If you're puzzled when I tell you it has something to do with the language of Romans, take heart. Over the years, many classes who have confessed they are not really sure what it is either. Some have assumed that they are so-called late Latin, written at the end of the Roman Empire. Others have supposed it must have something to do with the Middle Ages. Or perhaps it's that pseudo-Latin which my 5- and 7-year-old boys seem to have gleaned from the Harry Potter books, useful for spells and curses that they zip one another with makeshift paper ash ones. No, in fact, Neo-Latin is more or less the same as the Latin that was written in the ancient world, classical Latin. So, what's so new about it? Integrated ticket. Well, in 2004, we integrated ticketing in Southeast Queensland. So we have introduced a paper ticket that allowed you to travel across all the 3 modes in Southeast Queensland. So bus, train, and ferry. And the second stage of integrated ticketing is the introduction of a smart card. And the smart card will enable people to store value, so to put value on the card, and then to use the card for traveling around the system. CEO. That brings us to the CEO's second duty, building everyone, or more accurately, building the senior team. All the executives report to the CEO, so it's the CEO's job to hire, fire, and manage the executive team. From coaching CEOs, I actually think this is the most important skill of all. Because when a CEO hires an excellent senior team, that team can keep the company running. When a CEO hires a poor senior team, the CEO is up spending all of their time trying to do with the team, and not nearly enough time trying to do with other elements of their job. The senior team can, and often does, develop the strategy for the company, but ultimately, it's always the CEO who has the final go, no-go decision on strategy.
In electronics, there's an understanding that silicon and other elements are responsible for bringing our gadgets to life, while plastic serves as the supporting structure. But what if that plastic could be both the brains and the brawn? Better yet, what if plastic was pliable enough to form all sorts of wearable electronics and even implantable medical devices? In fact, electronics made from conductive plastic have been in the works for at least a decade. One of the difficulties has been overcoming a loss of conductivity when plastic electronics are stretched too far. A team of researchers from the US, South Korea, and China say they have found a way to keep an electrical connection even after stretching their specially made plastic more than 4 times its normal size. The key? Make a highly porous polymer, and then fill those pores with liquid metal. Imagine these 3D stretchable conductors being used to make artificial eyes that restore vision or synthetic skin that monitors blood glucose levels. A bit out there, I know, but science has a knack for catching up with science fiction.
You might picture Neanderthals as cavemen gnawing on bones around a campfire, which wouldn't be inaccurate. But Neanderthals may have also dined on roasted vegetables and known a bit about medicinal plants, too. So says a study in the journal Naturwissenschaften, the science of nature. Researchers analyzed hardened dental plaque from 5 Neanderthals found in El Cedrón cave in northern Spain. Yes, 50,000-year-old dental plaque. And they found a lot lurking between the teeth, like evidence of nuts, grasses, and green veggies, chemical traces of wood smoke, and tiny, intact starch granules, proof Neanderthals ate their carbs. In one individual, they detected compounds from the medicinal herbs chamomile and yarrow. The herbs have no nutritional value, and since Neanderthals did have the gene to detect the herb's bitter taste, the researchers speculate that the cave dwellers were munching on them not as food, but to self-medicate. Not too far-fetched, they say, because primates like chimps also use medicinal plants. Luckily for the scientists doing this detective work, Neanderthals may have known a thing or two about medicine, but they didn't get regular checkups at the dentist.
The eyes are the windows to the soul. As such, they can reveal if someone is lying, right? Cop shows, advice shows, even some organizational training courses hold that if somebody looks up and to the right, they're probably lying. Up and to the left means they're telling the truth. Now a study says that there is no connection between eye movement and lying. The work is in the journal Public Library of Science 1. Researchers tested eye movement and honesty in multiple ways. For example, they tracked the eye movements of subjects who were lying or telling the truth about things they had recently done. There was no correlation between lying and eye direction. The researchers also closely analyzed 52 archived news videos of real people making a public plea for the safe return of a missing relative. In half the videos, the plea was sincere, but in half there was strong evidence that the speaker was involved in the crime. Again, no eye movement clue was evident. So in judging the honesty of a speaker, remember, the eyes do not have it.
Our Milky Way galaxy has 2 large satellite galaxies orbiting it. They're known as the Large and Small Magellanic Clouds, and humans have been aware of the existence of these celestial objects for at least a millennium. Recently, researchers were curious about whether our configuration is fairly typical or an astronomical anomaly. In other words, is our corner of the cosmos ordinary? Now a new study finds that the Milky Way and its companion galaxies are an unusual combination, but they're not one of a kind. Astronomers in the UK and Australia looked at thousands of galaxies to try to find an analog of our arrangement. The search turned up 2 close replicas, each with a Milky Way-like galaxy, accompanied by 2 galaxies comparable to the Magellanic Clouds. But the researchers also concluded that such arrangements are pretty rare. Only 0.5% of Milky Way-like galaxies have companions like ours. The Magellanic Clouds may be transitory features. In a few billion years, the Milky Way may absorb them completely. So someday, our corner of the cosmos could be pretty ordinary after all.
Birds face many man-made mortal threats. Windows, cats, habitat destruction, even climate change. And now there's poison in their birdseed. You see, the Scott's Miracle-Gro company had been in the habit of applying banned pesticides to its wild bird food products. In particular, the company applied a chemical known as Storeside 2 to its bird food, despite a warning label for that product that reads, quote, Storeside 2 is extremely toxic to fish and toxic to birds and other wildlife. Why add a compound toxic to birds to food meant to be eaten by birds? Because Scott didn't want bugs infesting its bird food during storage. By the time Scott stopped adding the pesticide in March 2008, the company had sold some 70 million bags of adulterated bird food. The company also submitted false documents to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, distributed pesticides with misleading labels, and distributed illegal pesticides. As a result, the EPA slapped the company with a $12.5 million in criminal fines and civil penalties. So when you put out new birdseed this winter, at least you won't be inadvertently poisoning any chirpers. Oh, and keep those cats inside, too.
What we're bringing for our users is basically an immersive experience of a huge portion of the NASA Kennedy Space Center facility.
Ryan Failer, project manager of Google Street View. In honor of the center's 50th anniversary, Street View is adding more than 6,000 images of the Space Center, the starting point for Apollo and Space Shuttle missions.
So you can go into the facility, you can go into some of the large areas there, like the vehicle assembly building. You can go down to the launch pad and actually go up several floors of the launch pad and see where the astronauts would walk and where they would go as they were boarding the shuttle.
The shuttle is now a thing of the past, but someday Kennedy will host a new generation of spacecraft.
So when we were there, we actually got to take a snapshot of these structures and these systems in place, before all those transitions happened, right? And many of those facilities are going to be decommissioned or converted to different uses. The opportunity to kind of capture that moment in Street View and preserve it, make it accessible to people around the world is I think, really valuable and important.
Here's one way bats might get their next meal: by eavesdropping on flies having sex. Bats eat a lot of seemingly undetectable flies. To find out how the winged mammals find the insects, researchers set up a video camera inside a cowshed that was home to a bat colony and lots of bugs. The video showed that bats rely on their echolocation skills to detect flies at a specific time, when they're engaged in rather noisy sex. Flies are usually quiet in bat territory and sit on cluttered ceilings in caves, where background noise masks the echoes from their movement. But when flies are feeling frisky, males can't help but flutter their wings, emitting a burst of click sounds that the bats pick up on. During more than 1,000 sexual encounters caught in the act on video, 5% of the insects were caught in the act by bats. The research is published in the journal Current Biology. The study shows that ignorance can be safer than carnal knowledge when predators are on the prowl.
Being physically active has numerous benefits. Now a study has looked closely at the effects of fitness in the midlife years for preventing debilitating chronic diseases later. The ongoing study gathered fitness stats for more than 18,000 adults and followed their health status into old age. Assessing 40 years of that data, the analysis finds that those who had higher fitness levels in their 30s, 40s, and 50s were substantially less likely to have a chronic condition between the ages of 70 and 85. The findings are in the archives of internal medicine. Physical fitness seemed to stave off heart disease and heart failure, which might not be a big surprise, but it also reduced rates of diabetes, kidney disease, and even Alzheimer's disease. Current recommendations suggest adults make time for at least 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day, such as fast walking, jogging, biking, or swimming. Busy middle-aged people might find it especially hard to make time for such exercise, but a small investment looks like it could pay big health dividends for decades to come. Mosquitoes are an unpleasant fact of summer, but 2012 has been especially bad for running into these irritating insects, because some carry West Nile virus, and they're known to have infected some 2,000 people in 48 states this year. At least 87 people have died from the infection, which can cause swelling in the brain. Almost half the cases have been in Texas, and to lower risk of infection, some areas have taken extreme measures, including aerial pesticide spraying. But people can take some simple measures on their own to reduce their risk. In an essay in Annals of Internal Medicine, public health experts make recommendations. First, simply avoid areas likely to have mosquitoes. And if you can't or don't want to stay indoors, wear long clothes that cover your skin and use insect repellent. Eliminating standing water, such as that pooled in puddles or unused containers, can also help reduce mosquito breeding grounds and populations overall. Stopping the mosquito spread helps in the long run, which is what we have to deal with, because scientists say that West Nile virus is, unfortunately, here to stay.